Chapter 5, First Steps. Erin stepped forward through the doorway, bracing herself as the feeling of the ground underneath her switched from concrete to grass. The dim light of the lab gave way to natural sunlight as she looked around with her heart thundering in her chest. This was it, Ponyworld. The location she was in looked similar to the gentle hills of the first pony picnic she had seen, though the rich green grasses were long enough to reach halfway up her legs and were dotted with colorful wildflowers. She breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that there were no native ponies around. It would be awfully hard to be inconspicuous if any of the local ponies had seen her step out of a hole in the air. The environment around her seemed just as peaceful and idyllic as she had hoped it would be. It was warm, though not oppressively so, the Ponyworld sun gently warming the soft hairs of her coat as she stood in this new world. A mild breeze rustled the grass and the hairs of her mane and tail. The air itself smelled clean, fresh. It reminded her of the fields behind her aunt's farm in Nebraska, far away from the smell of cities and humanity. She closed her eyes and breathed deep, some of the tension melting from her as she let the alien sun warm her body. Insects hummed in the air, birds sang in the distance, but otherwise it was pretty much silent. This place was so peaceful and serene, it was like... Erin, a voice bellowed suddenly in her ear. She screamed, nearly jumping half out of her skin in shock. Erin, can you hear me? The voice continued. Yes, Dr. Belcheek, but can you turn the volume down? You nearly blasted my head off with that. Oh, sorry. How's this? The voice coming through the implanted speaker in her ear lowered to a much more acceptable volume. Better, she said. I'm here, in Ponyworld. It's amazing. She bounced on her hooves, giddy with excitement. I can see that, my dear. We're getting very good data. We've got the transmitter going full stream right now, gathering live data from all of your implants. So far, so good. The information is coming through beautifully. It's as we expected. Ponyworld is astonishingly Earth-like. Yeah, it's really beautiful here. I don't think I've ever seen grass this green before. Speaking of that, Erin, Dr. Belcheek said, sounding eager, if you wouldn't mind, could you take a little nibble? A nibble. Erin replied, confused. You mean, you want me to eat some of this grass? Very much so, if you don't mind. The sensors in your stomach will give us data on the chemical and biological makeup of it as you eat it. Ugh. Well, I suppose that's what I'm here for. With a sigh, she lowered her head and gave the grass between her hooves a tentative bite, then started chewing. Actually, it's not as bad as I thought it would be, she said before swallowing the few blades of grass she had in her mouth. Glad to hear it. Erin, as you see new plant life, I strongly encourage you to take a sample of it. The data would be invaluable. And remember, even if it tastes awful, it can't hurt you. You can eat nearly anything organic, remember? Yeah, I remember. Hey, I think I'll eat this flower, now. It looks like a daisy. She chomped down on it and started chewing. It was actually kind of tasty. That's the spirit. I'm going to close the doorway, now. Wait, what? Erin said in a sudden panic, spraying half-chewed daisy from her mouth as she whirled around just in time to see the harmonics lab behind her blip out of existence. She felt a cold wave of panic wash over her. She was stuck here, now. No way back, for better or worse, completely cut off from. Erin, can you still hear me? Dr. Belcheek asked. Yeah, I can hear you. That was the second time he'd managed to scare her. I thought you closed the connection. I closed the two-way doorway between worlds, yes. But I wanted to see if one of the smaller ones would be enough to allow us to still communicate. It's less obtrusive, that way. Oh, I see. Yes, see, the wavelengths between worlds matching up to such an extent that we can create a large doorway between worlds is very rare, and it also requires a lot of energy. Smaller ones, like the one I'm simulating now, come along maybe once or twice a week. I was afraid we'd be waiting weeks before we could collect more data from you. Oh, well. Yay, I guess, Erin said, still feeling a little abandoned. Why don't you wander around, my dear, and see what you can see? We've got some time before this window closes, and I want to be sure that we utilize it as much as possible. Oh, sure. Of course. Erin tried to put out of her mind how exposed, alone and vulnerable she felt on this alien world as she began trotting across the landscape, picking a direction randomly. She looked around herself in fascination. This really didn't look any different from Earth. Small hills, the occasional copse of trees, a large, spooky-looking forest off in the distance. Well, okay, the creepy forest was a little different, but otherwise it was a lot like where she grew up. As she walked, Dr. Belcheek would stop her and ask her to take a bite out of some local plant life. In short order, she had eaten another daisy, some dandelions, some thistles, and a wild rose, being very careful not to eat the thorns. It was during this roaming vegetarian smorgasbord that she heard the sound of running water in the distance and decided to make her way towards it. She finally found a small stream that gurgled its way along, and Erin trotted up to get a closer look. What a lovely little stream, Dr. Belcheek said in her ear, and Erin shuddered at the reminder that even the things she saw were being transmitted back to the harmonics lab. It was more than a little creepy. Could you drink some of the water, please? Dr. Belcheek continued, for the data. Oh, sure. She lowered her head and took a gulp. She quickly learned a very valuable lesson. When you wade into a shallow stream of water to take a drink, make sure you drink from upstream and not down. Her hooves had stirred up silt from the bottom, and she got a mouthful of it. Bleck. Ah, gross, it was all muddy. That's wonderful, Erin. Now we have water and soil samples. Wonderful, he says, but he's not the one with grit in his mouth, Erin muttered, rolling her eyes. You know that I can hear that, Erin. You were meant to, she shot back. His constant demands of eat this and nibble that had already been starting to get a little annoying even before she had sucked up a mouthful of mud water. Still grumbling, she rinsed out her mouth with clean water and spat before she stomping back to the bank and clambering up onto the dry grass. She looked around, totally lost, before deciding to walk upstream for a while. Erin's irritation dwindling rapidly as she walked, helped along by the feeling of her muscles stretching and warming up from the exercise while she was simultaneously being cooled by the gentle breeze that bent the grasses around her. It was a picture-perfect day, and it was nearly impossible to hold on to a bad mood when it was this beautiful out. Erin sighed, letting the last of her bad mood dissolve as she walked through the idyllic Ponyworld countryside. She had missed this, she suddenly realized. Simply being outdoors and walking in the sunlight. This was the first time she'd even seen the sun for around 2 months. Or, rather, an alien sun that was indistinguishable from the one on Earth. First, she had been locked away from the rest of the interns while she waited to be converted into a pony, then she was unconscious for a month, then she was locked away for nearly another month while she practiced on indoor tracks with her new body. They hadn't let her outside in order to keep her a secret. This was her first time outdoors as a pony and, much to her surprise, she loved it. She grinned impulsively, feeling the sudden need for a little mischief. She started at a trot, at first, and then broke into a wild gallop. She sped along the ground at a breakneck pace, noticing that having her eye line closer to the ground made it seem like she was running even faster than she really was. Which was honestly pretty darn fast, already, and much faster than she was capable of as a human. She started laughing with pure joy as the grass whipped by under her hooves, ignoring Dr. Velchik's voice buzzing insistently in her ear. The landscape of Ponyworld became a new obstacle course. She rounded bushes, jumped smoothly over depressions and rocks, climbed hills, and would suddenly cut in random directions as the wind took her. Her new, enhanced pony body responded beautifully, making the physical effort feel like nothing at all. All she felt was the sheer exhilaration of running. She reached the top of a hill and leapt as far as she could, and for a moment she felt like she was flying. Landing, she skidded to a halt, digging furrows in the soil with her hooves as she glanced back the way she'd come. She couldn't even see the stream anymore, or any other familiar landmarks. She wasn't sure how long she'd been running, but it only felt like a few minutes. And in that time, she was pretty sure she had run for miles. She was barely even sweating, and wasn't even breathing hard. I love this body, she thought joyfully. Finally, Erin sighed, and decided to acknowledge Dr. Velchik's frantic questioning in her ear. Sorry, Doctor, she said, feeling slightly irreverent. I just suddenly realized that I'd been cooped up indoors for weeks and decided to take the new body for a test run. It works great, by the way. Well, that's wonderful, Erin, he replied, sounding stern, but please keep in mind that we've got lots of testing to do, and a short time to do it. I'm not saying you can't enjoy yourself, from time to time, but at times like this, when we actually have a window open, we should really concentrate on testing. Yes, Daddy, she thought, but out loud she said, oh, okay. Sorry, I'll be good, and secretly resolved to have as much fun as possible while still accomplishing her mission to save both human and pony kind. Smiling, and thoroughly pleased with herself, she took off towards a grove of trees she saw in the distance. She moved at a brisk trot, still enjoying the sense of health and well-being this body gave her. As she got closer, she noticed that they were apple trees, heavy with bright red fruit. Nothing but apple trees, as far as she could see. Wow, neat. Apple trees, she said, trotting up to them. Yes, they do look remarkably like apples. Do they seem like normal apples to you? Dr. Velchik asked. Yeah, they look like perfectly normal apple trees. Interesting. There must be some sort of parallel evolution between our worlds to allow for so many similarities. You will, of course, be eating one of them, right? She stretched her head out towards a low-hanging fruit, and then shook her head. This looks cultivated. Doesn't that mean it's someone's orchard? I don't know the laws here. I want to get along with the other ponies, so I probably shouldn't start out by trespassing or being a thief. Whatever Dr. Velchik said in reply was drowned out as, at the same time, another voice said, you got that right, Sugar Cube. Erin eeped, and jumped in surprise. There was a native pony trotting around from behind a tree, not 10 feet away from her. She had a light orange coat and blonde mane and tail, and she wearing, of all things, what appeared to be a cowboy hat on her head. She had 3 apples on her flank, and spoke with what sounded to Erin like a southern accent. Erin felt a moment of panic. She wasn't ready for this. She tried to remember the cover story she had come up with and realized her memory was a complete blank. What was she supposed to say? This pony had an accent. Should she talk in an accent? She'd probably sound stupid if she tried. Would this pony attack her for trespassing? Was she going to get in trouble? She didn't want to go to pony jail. The strange pony smiled at her, and said, I can appreciate folks being honest, though. So, as a reward for not stealing an apple, how about I just give ya one for free? Erin scrambled mentally as her train of thought derailed. Okay, thank you. I'd really appreciate that. Erin grinned nervously back at the other pony. She could hear Dr. Velchik's excited breathing in her ear and found herself wishing with some irritation that she could mute him somehow. She didn't need a distraction from him right now. This was first contact with alien ponies. The pony walked up to the tree Erin was standing by, turned, and tapped it lightly with a rear hoof. A single apple fell out of the tree, which the strange pony head butted towards Erin. Acting on reflex, Erin snatched it out of the air with a snap of her jaws. As her teeth crunched into the apple, the juices ran into her mouth, and her eyes widened in shock. She quickly ate the whole thing, core and all, in a couple of bites and some noisy chewing, much to the stranger's apparent amusement. Well, she asked, at the same time Dr. Velchik said breathlessly in her ear, how does it taste? Does it taste like an apple? Erin swallowed and answered them both at the same time. That was, quite simply, the most delicious apple I've ever eaten in my entire life. Well, now, that's mighty kind of you to say, Missy, the strange pony said, laughing warmly. Even though I know it's true, it's sure nice to hear some pony else saying it. I'm Applejack, by the way. Erin thought quickly. Applejack. She had 3 apples on her rump. So, did pony names and their tattoos have something to do with each other? In that case, she'd need a name that reflected her own. She blurted out the only thing she could think of. Sunflower. I'm Sunflower. It's nice to meet you. Erin smiled back at her warily, waiting to see if the name seemed at all weird or wrong to Applejack. Her fears were quickly laid to rest, though, as Applejack came up, somehow clasped Erin's right forehoof in both of her hooves and began shaking it vigorously. Mighty nice to meet ya, Sunflower. You've gone and wandered into Sweet Apple Acres, best apple orchard in all of Equestria. I don't reckon I've seen ya round here before. You new to Ponyville? Ponyville. Oh, is that the nearest town? Erin shook her hoof slightly. It had gone numb from the shaking. How strong was this pony? Yup, you'd be able to see it if we were on the other side of the farm. So, what brings you to these parts? Oh, well, I'm just exploring, I guess. I want to meet new people, see new places. I want to learn as much about, what had Applejack called it? Oh, yeah, Equestria as I can, you know, Erin said, glad she was able to tell the truth about that much, at least. I can understand that. Why, when I was a filly, I thought it'd be a good sight better to live in Manhattan. O' course, I soon figured out that I belonged here, at home, and I ain't never looked back. But I recon, you got to see those sights when you can, so you can remember what's so important about home. So, where y'are from, originally? Erin considered for a moment. Equestria, Ponyville and now Manhattan. Horse-themed names seemed pretty common here. She briefly considered saying she was from Minneapolis, just to see if that would work, but then she thought it would be better not to lie. A lie could unravel and undermine any attempt she might make to integrate with pony society. Better to just withhold information, when possible, until she learned enough to fake it more convincingly. I'd rather not talk about that, Applejack, she said, shaking her head. I mean, if that's okay with you. I can't go back there now, anyway. Oh, I see, Applejack said, looking sad. Trouble at home, then. You could say that, Erin said, thinking of the black tide. Well, I won't pry, but if you're looking for a place to settle down, then, I reckon, you won't find anywhere better'n Ponyville. How about we celebrate your arrival by having you join the Apple family for lunch? I was just about to head back that way, and if you're heading to Ponyville, it's in the right direction. Oh, well, I wouldn't want to impose. Shucks, it ain't no imposition. Granny always cooks up a heap o' victuals more'n we can eat, anyways. Come on, then. And, with that, Applejack trotted off. Erin stood there for a moment, feeling awkward and afraid, before finally shaking herself and starting after her. As she trotted along next to Applejack, she couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement about being in the company of a non-human intelligence. She kept glancing at her companion out of the corner of her eye. Applejack was a little bigger than she was, probably about 2 inches taller at the shoulder, and heavily muscled to boot. She smelled slightly of sweat and dirt, but not offensively so. Not like a pony that hadn't been washing, but more like a pony that had been working hard all day out in the sun. As she watched the pony move confidently through the orchard, Erin felt a little worm of shame nibbling at her soul. She hadn't technically lied to Applejack. Well, not about anything other than her name, at least. But she had been raised to know that a lie of omission, or intentionally telling the truth in a way that would be interpreted incorrectly, was as good as telling a lie. She sighed, hoping that it would all end up being worth it. She could only do what she could, after all, and it was unlikely that Applejack would be the last pony she'd have to deceive. Erin, listen, Dr. Welchik whispered in her ear, as if he was afraid Applejack would overhear. Erin tensed and tried not to show any reaction on her face. We're about to lose this window. You'll be on your own in a moment, but you're doing great. You've already given us tons of valuable data, such as the real name of this world. But there's so much more to learn. Remember, take care of yourself and keep a low profile. You'll be. There was a crackle, and Dr. Welchik's voice cut out. Erin shivered. She really was alone, now. Completely and totally cast off in an alien world. The natives seemed friendly enough, at least, but it was still frightening. She thought about her first night at college, off in a strange town and on her own for the first time in her life. This feeling was similar to that, but much, much more intense. At least, then, she could call her parents if things got too bad. But now she was in a world where she didn't understand the rules, and she had literally nobody to fall back on, should things get rough. She should have been terrified. And, in truth, she was scared, straight down to the tips of her hooves. But she was also excited, she couldn't deny that. It was a few minutes after Dr. Welchik's voice had cut out that Applejack stopped suddenly, looking into the sky. Well, Woodage Lukey here, she said with a tone of annoyance that didn't match the amused look on her face. Looks like we're about to get us some company. She waved a hoof in the air and shouted, howdy, Rainbow Dash. Erin looked up and saw a light blue winged pony, with a surprisingly prismatic mane and tail, turning in the air and starting to descend rapidly in their direction. Wow. A winged pony, she said, forgetting for a moment that Applejack was standing right next to her. She started, glancing over at her orange companion guiltily, to see the look of confusion on Applejack's face. Sunflower, ya ain't never seen a Pegasus pony before, she asked. Oh, Erin's thoughts scrambled briefly, and then she decided that the half-truth option she'd been following before would probably continue to work. No, actually, where I grew up there weren't any. Erin faltered briefly. What was the plural of that? Pegasuses. Pegasi. She decided to skip it. Just regular ponies kind of like you and me. Really? No unicorns or Pegasi, just earth ponies. Applejack's eyes were wide with surprise. Erin's heart skipped a beat at earth pony, before she realized that Applejack probably was referring to a type of pony, like the Pegasus types. She shook her head, no, and was about to try to elaborate when the pony Applejack had referred to as Rainbow Dash, landed in front of them with a flourish. Erin stared in complete awe. Cool, she said, amazed. Rainbow Dash looked startled for a moment, then grinned and puffed out her chest, wings spread wide. You know it. Hey, Applejack, who's your friend? Rainbow Dash's voice was rougher than Applejack's, though still obviously feminine. Rainbow Dash, this is Sunflower. Sunflower, this is Rainbow Dash, who, somehow, seems to always manage to be just casually passing by when it's about time for the Apple family to take a break and eat lunch. Yeah, that's an amazing coincidence, isn't it? Rainbow Dash said, covering up the blatant lie with an air of complete innocence that Erin couldn't help but chuckle at. Does that mean that you're on your way to lunch now? Yup, and, like always, you're welcome to join us. Along with Sunflower, here, who apparently ain't never seen a Pegasus before. What? Seriously, what kind of a backwater village did you come from where you've never seen a Pegasus? Rainbow Dash was looking at Erin in shock. Erin cringed, flushing red and looked down at her hooves. Was this where everything came crashing down? Had she already told a lie that would unravel everything and expose her? I was. Ponies where I'm from are very different, I guess you can say. It's one of the reasons I left home. I mean, I'd heard about unicorns and Pegasi, but I'd never seen them in person, and I wanted to. She kept staring at her hooves. There was no way that would go over, would it? Any second now, they'd catch on, call her out, probably run her off. I think I've heard that, Applejack said, places where a group of Earth ponies all get together and try and do things on their own, without no help from unicorns and Pegasi. Go and it alone, if ya see what I mean. Yeah, but who does their weather for them? Rainbow Dash asked, then shaking her head in confusion and adding, it doesn't make sense. Now, Rainbow, Sunflower's my guest, and she already said she don't want to talk about her hometown. I don't want ya pestering her with a bunch o' questions she don't feel like answerin', got it? Yeah, but, the light blue Pegasus cringed back from Applejack's sudden glare. Okay, I got it. Sheesh, I still think it's weird, though. Does it help if I do, too? Erin asked. Applejack guffawed at that, and Rainbow Dash chuckled after a moment. It was then that Erin heard a clanging sound in the distance. Come on, Yal, Applejack said. That'll be the dinner bell. Race ya back to the farmhouse. Applejack took off running, and Rainbow Dash grinned and ran after her. After a moment of hesitation, Erin smiled and ran after them. She felt buoyant, almost like she could float through the air through sheer relief. The earlier fear of discovery was gone, or at least greatly muted. The first hurdle had been passed. She was on her way to being accepted into pony society. Next, she needed a job and a place to stay. Her stomach growled noisily, in spite of the sparse vegetation and the apple she had munched on earlier, interrupting her train of thought. Correction, she thought as she ran. First lunch, then a job and a place to stay. She started laughing as she chased after the ponies ahead of her. Author's notes. Chapter 6, Lunch with the Ponies. At first, it was just a friendly run, with everyone keeping up with each other but not really straining. But apparently Applejack and Rainbow Dash had a bit of a rivalry going on. One of them would take a small lead, and the other would increase her pace to regain the lead and extend one of their own. Erin noticed that Applejack would glance back from time to time to make sure that she was keeping up. Well, nuts to that, she thought, deciding to show off what her new body could do. She grinned and sped up herself, coming up between the two ponies. Is this really the fastest you guys can go? She asked them with outrageously faked innocence. Applejack chuckled at that, and Rainbow Dash grinned back and said, oh, you want a real race? You got it. Both the orange and blue ponies kicked it into high gear, and suddenly there was a gap growing between them and Erin. She stared after them, momentarily surprised at their sudden acceleration. She then gave herself a mental shake and increased her own efforts accordingly. They may be fast, but hers was a body built by the best that Earth science had to offer. The scent of apples was strong in her nose as she galloped along, the sound of wind and her own breathing loud in her ears, while her mane and tail streamed out behind her. Trees whipped past them as they ran, hooves thundering across the soft earth beneath the trees. The occasional fallen apple turned out to be an additional hazard, requiring some fancy hoofwork to avoid stepping on the possibly semi-rotten fruit. At the speed they were going, stepping on one of those squidgy apples would be like suddenly hitting a patch of ice. It wouldn't end well for whatever pony ended up putting a hoof wrong. Enhanced reflexes or no, Erin exercised extra caution. She'd been a pony for just a few weeks, and she wasn't nearly as graceful as the other two. The three of them burst from the trees, very nearly neck and neck. In the distance, Erin could see a large barn-like structure, which seemed to be the destination. No longer needing Applejack as a guide, and with no further obstacles in the way, Erin let loose a wild whoop and pushed her body as hard as she could, a wide grin plastered across her muzzle. With her enhanced speed, she was sure that there was no way the other two could keep pace with her. That's why Erin almost tripped over her own hooves in shock as Applejack caught up to her and tipped her a wink. Rainbow Dash's prismatic mane could be seen streaming on the other side of the farm pony's head. Her previous grin was replaced by a frown of determination as Erin turned her attention back to the race, pushing harder than ever. Her breathing was labored now, coming more ragged and strained, and she felt sweat pouring down her back and across her flank. The three ponies shot past a large picnic table that was set up with various foods, Erin barely registering the surprised looks on the faces of the three ponies already sitting on convenient piles of hay in front of the table. By some unspoken signal, that was the end of the race, and they slowed from the gallop and into a walk. Erin's knees felt decidedly wobbly as she finally came to a full stop, head down and breathing heavily. For the life of her, she wouldn't have been able to say which one of them had passed the table first. It was some consolation to her that Applejack and Rainbow Dash seemed just as out of breath as she was. Nobody talked for a minute or so, while the three of them all caught their breath. Finally, Applejack straightened up, pushed her hat back on her head slightly, and looked Erin straight in the eye. Land sake, girl, she said, still sounding slightly out of breath, ya sure gave us a run for our money. I didn't take you for an athlete when I first saw ya, but you got some serious speed, there. Erin grinned at her weakly, while Rainbow Dash said, yeah, but which one of us won? I don't know, said Erin, does it really matter? The Pegasus gave her a look of stunned disbelief. Of course it matters. How could it not matter? Erin shook her head. I don't know, I was paying more attention to running than to who was in the lead. Maybe we should just call it a three-way tie. Fine by me, Applejack replied, as she turned and started walking back towards the picnic table they had passed. Rainbow Dash trotted up next to her, snorting and rolling her eyes. Whatever, she said, maybe next time, we should do a real race. You up for a rematch, AJ? Ha. You just name the time and place, Rainbow, and I'll be there. The farm pony looked over at Erin and said, how about you, Sunflower? You interested in another race? Sure, I guess, Erin said, still feeling a little stunned by the race results. She was supposed to have been modified past any natural creature's abilities. No Earth pony would have been able to keep up with her, she was sure of that. How did these ponies get to be so fast? The supposed survival advantages that the scientists had given her suddenly seemed like a much flimsier thing, basically amounting to no advantage at all. Erin found that thought more than a little disturbing. She had been counting on those advantages to keep her safe. Caught up in her thoughts, with her eyes on her hooves, Erin almost bumped into the table before she realized that they had reached it. She glanced up in surprise to see three ponies looking at her and the others. She didn't have much time to register the other two, because one of them, an old green mare with her white mane tied back in a bun, was coming around from the far side of the table, scolding the three of them fiercely. Now, look at what ya did here, ya giddy bunch of half-brained foals. Ya went and kicked up a bunch of dust all over her victuals. Ain't a one o you got a liquor sense in your silly heads. Rainbow Dash, I expect this kind of thing from yer, but I reckon I expected more from you, AJ. The ancient pony then turned her eye on Erin and poked her in the chest with a hoof, saying, and you don't know at all, but I'd guess you're just as big a block-headed lump as these two idiots here. Erin started stammering out apologies, but was distracted when another one of the ponies at the table stood up and shouted, yeah. Granny and I worked real hard making this food. Erin stared at the small filly who had piped up. She was yellow in color, with a red mane and tail, and was wearing a big pink bow. Whatever apologies Erin had been trying to make got derailed into mumbles as she stared at the filly, all the while thinking, oh my god she's so cute. Fortunately, a shamefaced Applejack started talking, distracting Erin before her staring at the adorable filly turned too weird. Granny, I'm mighty sorry that we made a mess o' lunch. Tell ya what, Rainbow Dash and I'll do the cleanup all by ourselves tar make up bear it. What? Rainbow Dash said, looking startled, I kinda have a thing I wanted to do. Practice and more tricks. Well. Yeah, or a nap. I'll help too, Erin said, it's partly my fault, after all. Ah, now, you don't need to do that, Sugarcube. You're a guest and all. And what am I, chopped parsnips, muttered Rainbow Dash, just loud enough to hear. No, you're a freeloader, Applejack snarked back. The rainbow Pegasus stuck her tongue out at her. It's okay, I don't mind, Erin said, smiling. Besides, I was kind of thinking I should help anyway, what with the free lunch and all. Well, that's mighty kind o' ya, Sunflower. Oh, I suppose introductions are in order. Sunflower, this here is Granny Smith. Nice to meet you, Erin said. Fiddlesticks, said Granny. There was a short, awkward pause. Then the orange pony started the introductions again, this time pointing a hoof at the filly. This here is my lil' sister, Apple Bloom. Nice to meet you, Apple Bloom. Likewise, the filly said, still obviously annoyed about the dust on the lunch table, but trying to be polite. And this big lug here, Applejack went on, is my big brother, Macintosh. We all just call him Big Mac. Nice to meet you, Macintosh, Erin said, a little intimidated by the big red stallion. As strong as she knew Applejack to be, it was hard to imagine how incredibly strong this guy was. He was much bigger than Applejack, to begin with, and incredibly well muscled. He looked like he could knock over brick buildings. By accident, he was also staring resolutely at the picnic table. "Yup," was all he said. Rainbow Dash leaned over and whispered into Erin's ear, he's also single, you know. Erin stiffened in shock, and judging by the sudden deepening of the red on Big Mac's face, Rainbow's whisper had carried a bit further than she had intended. Or maybe not, judging by the way she started snickering at the stallion's obvious discomfort. That's, nice. Erin really hoped that she didn't look too embarrassed right now. Suddenly, she remembered what Dr. Edwards had said about hanky-panky with the local stallions and blushed furiously. Rainbow Dash noticed that and started laughing hysterically, flapping her wings to stay airborne while she hugged her ribcage with her forelegs. Oh, wow, you should see your face, Sunflower, the Pegasus gasped. We could pop popcorn, you're so red. That doesn't even make sense. Erin snapped at her, flushing more heatedly than ever. Rainbow responded by laughing even harder. Erin glanced around, looking for an ally. Big Mac just looked like he wanted to sink into the ground, which was a sentiment that she shared. Granny Smith, meanwhile, was looking at her with what Erin was mildly horrified to see was a calculating look on her face. Applejack had pulled her hat down over her eyes, trying her best to not laugh at the whole mess. She was failing. Little Apple Bloom was looking back and forth between Erin and her big brother, looking confused. Then, suddenly, a look of comprehension flashed across her face, quickly followed by a mischievous grin. Erin worried about the grin. She decided to study her hooves for a while, until all the laughing blew over and her face returned to its normal complexion. Finally, Rainbow and Applejack stopped laughing enough for the light blue Pegasus to say, oh, that was hilarious. And now, I'm famished. Let's eat. Erin, who had spent the last minute staring at her hooves while waves of embarrassment rolled over her, started walking towards the far end of the table, as far away from Macintosh as she could. Rainbow dashed in front of her, saying, oh, no, this is my seat. Sorry, Sunflower. Erin glowered at the smug expression on her blue face. Applejack was already seated at the center of the table, leaving the only open spot. Right across from Big Mac, she noticed. Great, this won't be awkward at all. Reluctantly, she made her way to the little pile of hay left and sat down, staring fixedly at the table. She glanced up briefly and saw that Big Macintosh, too, was studying the table in depth. Relieved with the lack of eye contact, Erin took her first real look at the food. And she was amazed. When Applejack had first invited her to lunch, she was thinking that, maybe, if she was lucky, they'd have some sort of salads. After all, that's what ponies eat, right? Vegetation. And, while there were indeed plenty of raw fruits and veggies, what she caught her eye instead were loaves of steaming bread, obviously just pulled out of the oven, several jars of jam, piles of greens heaped on plates and smothered in what appeared to be butter, some sort of pasta salad and, most gloriously of all, a variety of pies, cookies, muffins and other baked goods. Erin swallowed to avoid drooling as her stomach growled loudly again. The Apple family dug in, and Erin decided to try a bit of jam on some of the warm, crusty bread. Spreading the jam would have been a pretty difficult trick if she hadn't seen Apple Bloom do it first, grabbing the spreader in her mouth and smearing the jam all over a slice of bread. Erin was a little uncomfortable, at first, using the same utensils that others had just had in their mouths, but then shrugged and shoved her issues aside. When in Equestria, she thought. She grabbed the spreader and plunked a generous blob of the sticky red jam on her slice of bread, balanced it on a hoof and brought it up to her face, then took a big bite. She stopped, then, eyes wide with disbelief. Not only was it quite definitely raspberry jam, but it was also simply the best raspberry jam she'd ever eaten. Like the apple she'd had earlier, this food just made her taste buds sing. This jam is amazing, she said, earning a smile from Apple Bloom and a mutter from Granny Smith about how maybe she ain't such a big idiot after all. Erin made fast work of that slice of bread, and determined that she would try a little bit of everything on the table. This was a task made a little more awkward by the persistent questioning of Apple Bloom, who was apparently determined to get Erin's entire life story. The little filly peppered her with questions, like where she was from, what she did for a living, whether she was moving to town or not, whether she had a special pony, which triggered another round of blushing and gaze avoidance between her and Big Mac, much to Dash's amusement, and how she got her cutie mark. The cutie mark question confused Erin briefly until she realized that the filly was referring to her flank tattoo. She wondered, briefly, if that term applied both to males and females. Most men, in her admittedly limited experience, wouldn't want to be associated with something that had cutie right in the name. Erin did her best to deflect the filly's question barrage, until, thankfully, Applejack stepped in and scolded her for pestering the guest. Apple Bloom obeyed her sister with bad grace, pouting adorably. Thankfully, the meal apart from that was fairly low-key. Applejack mainly talked to her family about the work that she was doing out in the Southfield that day, where Erin had met her. Big Mac ate like a machine, not quickly, but not slowing down for anything. He didn't say much, answering any question put to him with a standard yup or nope. Rainbow Dash mainly just concentrated on shoveling food into her face for a while, and then got visibly bored waiting for the others to finish eating. Once everyone was mostly sated and reduced to casual nibbling, Applejack asked Erin if there were any questions she had, what with you being new to Ponyville and all. She considered that for a moment, and then decided to get the most obvious needs out of the way. Well, as you know, I'm traveling and looking for a place to settle down. Do you know if there's any work around Ponyville I can do, or any place I can stay while I'm here? Shoot, Hon, Applejack said, looking slightly downcast. If you'd got here a few weeks from now, we could have used an extra hoof or two for Applebucken. But right now is the slow time bear the farm, and we ain't looking to hire any extra help. Applejack looked really distressed that she couldn't help, so Erin hurried to reassure her. Oh, no, Applejack, you don't need to feel bad about it. I'm the one who just showed up with no plans or preparations. I wasn't expecting you to hire me, especially if you don't need help. Don't worry too much about it, said Rainbow Dash, idly flicking a stray pea back and forth across the table with her hoof. Loads of ponies in town need help. You can probably just look for help wanted signs. As for somewhere to stay, well, I'd offer to let you crash with me, but, you know, Cloud House and all. Right, Erin replied, wondering what she meant by Cloud House, but hesitant to ask about it. Well, odd jobs sound good. That way'll get to meet a lot of the ponies in town, right? I reckon so. And for a place to stay, there's always the Ponyville guest house. Ya just need to stop by town hall and talk to a clerk. They'll get ya all set up with a place to stay. It's just a bed and blanket, nothing fancy, but no visitors to our town have ever had to sleep in the streets. I reckon, that'll do ya until you find a place you can rent. Oh, that's wonderful. Thanks for the guidance, Erin said, thrilled. She now had a solid and delicious meal in her, a place she could spend the night, and the prospect of work. She considered that things were definitely looking up for her. I'm gonna take a nap, Granny Smith said loudly, startling everyone at the table. The old green mare creaked to her hooves, hobbling her way back to the barn house that was apparently where the Apple family lived. As she walked slowly away, she shouted over her shoulder, mind ya clear this table like ya said, Applejack. And I'm gonna go find Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo, we've got some crusadin to do today. Nice to meet ya, Sunflower. And, with that, the little filly ran off. Big Mac stood up, then, cleared his throat, waited a moment, and then said, "Yup." Then he walked off as well. He doesn't talk much, does he? Erin said, as Big Mac walked away. Nah, Applejack shook her head, he's just shy. Once he relaxes, round ya can't get him to shut up lessen ya stick a caramel apple in his mouth. I think he likes you, Rainbow said in a sing-song voice. Erin blushed again. She didn't know the Blue Pegasus very well, but this wasn't the first time she'd met someone who took great joy in embarrassing others and wouldn't stop a joke as long as she got a reaction. Now, Rainbow, quit it, Applejack said, in a voice that was half joking and half stern. Poor Sunflower here's new to town and here you are, pestering her like this. Let the girl get her hooves under her before ya start pranking her. Give her, at least 2 days. Oh, sure, fine. The rainbow-maned pony said, flapping her wings and hovering just off the ground in a way that made Erin's brain hurt with the way it seemed to defy physics. You got 2 days, Sunflower, then bam. All bets are off. Rainbow and Applejack both chuckled at this. In spite of herself, Erin joined in as well. Fine, 2 days it is, she said. Well, come on now, Applejack said as she stood up, this table ain't gonna clear itself. With that, she grabbed a plate in her teeth and, with a deft flip, transferred it to her back. Then she did the same for a couple other plates. Erin stared, amazed at the dexterity she showed. She knew better than to try such a flip herself, though. Instead, she gingerly took a serving platter in her teeth and carefully transferred it to her back, then managed to stack a plate on top of it. It felt too precarious to try to add more, so she left it at that and walked slowly after the farm pony, careful to avoid dumping the dishes off of her back. Rainbow Dash, grumbling, grabbed up a few more dishes of her own, balancing them on her outstretched wings rather than her back. Come on, Slowpoke, she said to Erin as she trotted past her. Erin, still afraid the load on her back would shift and fall off, decided to maintain her slow but steady pace. She followed the other two into a charmingly rustic kitchen, up to a large sink where they divested themselves of their burdens. Washing dishes as a pony turned out to be quite an interesting experience. Following Applejack's lead, she would hold a dish in her 4 hooves, balancing her legs on the rim of the sink, while holding a scrubbing brush in her teeth. Rainbow Dash took a couple more trips to gather everything up off the table, and then asked pointedly if there was anything else she could do, since there wasn't any more room at the sink. Applejack rolled her eyes and told her she could go, at which the rainbow-maned Pegasus grinned, said goodbye, and flew off. When they were all done washing up, Applejack took some of the leftovers, including a small pot of jam, and wrapped it up in a small towel. She put it down on the counter next to Erin, saying, "Here, take this with you. Least I can do is make sure that you got a decent meal ahead of you." "Oh, Applejack, you didn't have to do that," Erin said, honestly touched. "You've been so generous already." Or, "Shucks, it ain't a big thing. Consider it a welcome to Honeyville present, if you want. Now, I gotta get back to my chores, but I can point the way to town and you'll just follow me." Erin undid a flap on one of her saddlebags, grabbed the package the generous pony had given her, and placed it inside. There was barely any room for it, but she managed to get in there without squishing the bread too badly. Then she refastened the flap and hurried after the orange pony. Now, if y'all head up the road that way, you'll find Ponyville, Applejack said, pointing a hoof. Won't take y'all more than a half hour, at a good walk. Now, I gotta get back to work, but feel free to stop by and say howdy once y'all get settled. Thanks for everything, Applejack, Erin replied, smiling. And, please thank your sister and Granny for me, too, when you see them next. The food was really amazing. I'll be sure to do that. Oh, and when y'all get to town, say hi to Pinkie Pie for me. What? You'll see, Applejack said with a chuckle. Then she waved her hoof in farewell and trotted away, back towards where they had first met. Erin smiled, feeling much more relaxed about being in Ponyworld. Rather, make that Equestria, than she had earlier today. The locals were obviously very friendly, and the situation was looking up. Humming an aimless little tune, she turned and walked down the road to Ponyville. The road on either side of her was brimming with apple trees at first, and then those abruptly stopped as she left Sweet Apple Acres property. The land returned to the familiar fields that she was starting to think of as the default landscape for the area. She trotted along briskly, taking in the sights and sounds, reflecting on how beautiful it was here. She'd been in the countryside before, but everything here was so vibrant, so alive. Like the plants on Earth had just a little less color than the plant life here. After a short while, Ponyville proper came into view. She had plenty of time to look at the town as she approached, noting the rustic design of many of the buildings, thatched roofs and all. Some of the buildings looked really odd, though. Erin stopped trotting for a moment, deciding to get a closer look at the town before heading in. She concentrated briefly, and the cybernetic implants in her eyes responded. She activated the telescopic feature, and suddenly the faraway town jumped up close. The town was arranged around a large building that she took to be Town Hall, with a small river flowing nearby. Erin would have to cross a bridge to get to it. Ponies were wandering around, many with saddle bags. She saw a few unicorns for the first time since she arrived, some of them levitating things around, walking through the town. There also seemed to be an open-air market, which Erin resolved to visit immediately after she stopped at Town Hall and got herself a place to stay for the night. The odds of finding work were probably much higher in the marketplace than anywhere else. Most of the buildings followed that same rustic pattern, but a few were odd. There was a shop that looked, for some reason, like a jester's hat. Another looked like a crazy gingerbread house. Her contemplation of those buildings was suddenly cut short as her long-range vision was cut off by a wall of pink. Hi, a voice said right in front of her. Gar, Erin replied, stumbling backwards in shock. With her concentration broken, her eyesight returned to normal and the pink wall in front of her resolved into a grinning pink pony with a slightly darker pink mane. The pony was staring at her with blue eyes from under her wildly curly mane. Ooh, sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. You were just staring at Ponyville for so long, I thought maybe you were scared to go in or something. And I wanted to let you know it was okay, since every pony in Ponyville is super incredibly nice and friendly, especially me. And I tried waving at you, but I guess you didn't see me, which was weird, because I was just right over there. So, you must be new in town, since I don't know you, and I know every pony in Ponyville. Hi, I'm Pinkie Pie. Erin stared at her in shock. The pink pony had rattled all that off without even seeming to stop for breath. Wait, did she say, Pinkie Pie? Applejack says hi, she managed to say. Oh, really? That's neat. How can you tell? Do you have super duper hearing or something? No, I just met her at her farm, and she gave me directions to Ponyville and said to say hi when I saw you. So, hi Pinkie Pie, it's nice to meet you, I'm Sunflower. Hi, I'm Pinkie Pie, but you already know that. It's nice to meet you, Sunflower. Are you going to be staying in Ponyville? Well, if I can find work and a place to stay, I will. Erin eyed the strange pony warily. Pinkie was bouncing on her hooves as she talked, clearly extremely hyper. Great. I'll have to throw you a surprise party. But for now, I have to go see Applejack about getting some baking apples for Sugarcube Corner. You don't have to. Wait, surprise party. How can it be a surprise party if you just told me about it? Oh, silly. I told you I'd give you one, not when. That's the surprise. Okay, Erin replied. Well, it was really nice meeting you, Pinkie Pie. I've got to get to Town Hall to see about getting a room at the guest house. Is that the big building there? Erin pointed with her hoof, and the pink pony aligned herself alongside her and squinted down her leg as if she were sighting down a rifle barrel. Yup, that's it. It was nice meeting you, and I'll see you later. Pinkie turned barely had taken 2 steps when she suddenly stopped and stared at Erin with a surprised look on her face. Uh-oh, she said. Knee twitch, itchy back, rumbly tummy. My Pinkie sense is telling me that some pony is keeping a major secret from me. Erin stared at her blankly. Pinkie sense. Pinkie looked away from her, towards Sweet Apple Acres. Applejack. She said, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Then she turned back to Erin, her eyes returned to the normal giddy friendliness. Well, I gotta go see what humongous secret Applejack is keeping from me. Bye for now, Sunflower. And with that, and while humming a happy song, Pinkie Pie bounced down the road in the oddest gait Erin had ever seen a pony use. She shook her head in confusion, and then started to walk down to the town ahead. Chapter 7, Ponyville. Erin's nervousness dwindled as she crossed the bridge into Ponyville proper. So far, none of the ponies had reacted as if she were in any way unusual. There was no pointing, no odd looks, no screaming in fear. In fact, the only reaction she got from the ponies was the occasional smile, wave, or friendly greeting such as nice weather today, isn't it? She broke into a grin as she walked along. This town was such a happy place, and the ponies were all such wonderful people, that she just couldn't help but be in a good mood. In fact, the only thing that was disturbing her at that moment was an itchy feeling she was getting under the canvas that was holding her saddlebags across her back. Not really surprising, considering how much running around and sweating she'd done since arriving. But hopefully, once she got a room at the guest house, she'd be able to get her bags off and give herself a good brushing. With that in mind, and with a spring in her step, she bounced up the steps to the door to Town Hall and let herself inside. The first thing she saw was a large, impressive open area in the center, with pillars running along towards a podium. In the center of the room was a wooden portable desk on wheels, and behind the portable desk was a slightly tired-looking beige earth pony with a grey streaked green mane. Can I help you? The pony asked her. Yes. I'm thinking of moving to Ponyville, and I was told that I should stop here and ask about getting a room in the guest house. Oh, welcome to Ponyville, the receptionist said, perking up slightly. My name is Lime Swirl, what's yours? I'm Sunflower, nice to meet you. Same here, the mayor said cheerily, then opened up a drawer in her desk and pulled a ledger out. She flipped the book open, paging through what seemed to be a list of names until she reached a page that was only partially filled in. Then the green-maned mare picked a pen up in her teeth and scribbled a date and the name, Sunflower, in there. Okay, Sunflower, Lime Swirl said as she returned the ledger to its drawer. How this works is that you can stay, for free, at the guest house for up to 3 nights. After that, we charge you a bit a night, or 5 bits for a week. Does that sound all right? It sounds perfect, thanks. And here is your complimentary, welcome to Ponyville, gift pack. The beige mare said, pulling out a folder from another drawer. Erin took it gingerly in her teeth. It's got maps, coupons, a brief history of the town, and the local railroad schedules. Also, there's a paper inside that you need to give over to Meadowlark, who runs the Ponyville guest house. Ank, ooh, Erin mumbled around the edges of the folder, momentarily at a loss with what to do with it. Then she placed it on her back, untied her bag with her teeth, and delicately slid the folder inside. The older pony hadn't finished talking yet, though. Speaking of being new in town, have you seen Pinkie Pie yet? Yes, Erin said, blinking in surprise. Was that mare famous or something? She said she was going to throw me a surprise party sometime later, and that not knowing when was the surprise. Oh, good. That's taken care of, then. Make sure you go to the party and enjoy yourself, Lime Swirl said, smiling chirpily. Then the smile faded and a deadly serious look came over the mare's face. If you don't enjoy yourself, Pinkie's going to cry. You don't want to make Pinkie cry. Why, what happens then? Erin asked nervously. Oh, nothing, the mare said, waving a hoof. It's just heartbreaking and really awkward for every pony watching. Erin stared at her in confusion while the green-maned mare smiled back at her. Anyway, you want to head north once you exit here. The guest house is right across the town square, with a big red door on the front of it. And, if you don't know which way is north, just remember that Canterlot is to the northeast. Canterlot. Canterlot. Yes, you know, Canterlot. Erin continued to stare at her blankly. The castle that the princesses rule Equestria from. Oh, yeah, Erin lied smoothly, I know what Canterlot is. But how do I know which way it is from here? You're kidding, Lime Swirl said, a deadpan expression on her face. You're kidding, right, quote. Go out the door and take a left, then follow the curve of the building around. Look above the tops of the houses. Trust me, you'll see it. Okay. Thanks again for all your help. It was my pleasure, Sunflower. And, welcome to Ponyville, Lime Swirl replied with a once again cheerful demeanor, waving a hoof. Erin waved back and walked out of the town hall. Taking a left turn, she trotted around the building, shaking her head. She hadn't noticed any castles nearby when she had looked down into Ponyville earlier, but she thought maybe it might be really small and easily overlooked. She was quickly disabused of that notion when she rounded the bend and saw the not exactly subtle castle protruding off the side of an even less subtle mountain. How did I miss that? Erin thought while gaping stupidly at the castle and the city that surrounded it. The castle glimmered in the distance, and looked almost delicate, with many towers and spires. It was so obviously a fairy tale castle that Erin half expected Tinkerbell to come flying out of it while waving a magic wand. All in all, it was simply gorgeous, with the late afternoon sunlight glinting off of it. Erin made up her mind that she would like to visit that place, once she had gotten all the information she could out of Ponyville. After all, if that was where the princesses ruled from, then there was bound to be good information to be collected there. She considered that for a moment. Equestria was ruled by princesses. How many? Why not a queen, or a king, or for that matter princes? Not that she had a problem with ruling princesses, but she determined to ask some very careful questions and listen closely to conversations in order to find out how this government was organized. For that matter, maybe she should check the town map to see if there was a library in Ponyville. She could probably gain a lot of information just by reading a couple of history books. She put that on her mental, to-do, list as something to look for after she got settled in the guest house. Speaking of which. Erin trotted forward, finally tearing her eyes away from the gorgeous castle. Lime Swirl hadn't been kidding, the guest house was hard to miss. Directly in front of her was a large, mostly square building, though still with a thatched roof. It was a bit bigger than the other buildings in the area. She walked up and regarded the door, which had a small golden plaque on it that confirmed that this was, indeed, the guest house. She considered the door for a moment. Should she just go in? Knock first. Then she spotted what looked like a doorbell, and pushed it gently with her nose. Delicate, musical chimes sounded inside. After a moment, the door was opened by a bright yellow unicorn mare with a light grey mane pulled back into a no-nonsense bun. She looked fairly young, at least compared to Lime Swirl and especially to Granny Smith, so Erin assumed that the grey was cosmetic and not due to age. Yes, she asked, looking at Erin curiously with her light green eyes. Hi, my name is Sunflower. Lime Swirl sent me over. I was going to see if I could stay a night or two. Oh, of course. Did she give you the welcome kit? Yeah, it's in my left saddlebag. Erin quickly untied the flap again and pulled the packet out with her teeth. Then she jumped in surprise as the packet suddenly started glowing with a yellow light, and then floated gently away from her. Meadowlark didn't act as if anything were wrong at all as it floated up to her, flipped itself open, and then a sheet of paper was pulled out, all without any obvious means of support. Erin's mind was buzzing with shock and wonder. Telekinesis. Right in front of her, this unicorn was using telekinesis, and acting like it was no big deal. Meadowlark looked up and frowned at the stunned expression on Erin's face. Is anything wrong? Erin shook herself and closed her mouth with a snap. No, of course not, she said, giggling shrilly. Why would anything be wrong? She was unaware that her eyes were practically bugging out of her head. Okay, Meadowlark said, tilting her head to her left. What, have you never seen a unicorn use magic before? What, magic? Oh, no, of course, I've seen magic loads of times. At birthday parties, in movies. Erin thought, slightly giddy with excitement. She wondered why they called it magic instead of something more sensible like telekinesis, but decided that she could find that out later. Meadowlark stared at her for a moment, then shook her head. All right, follow me, she said, turning and heading into the guest house. As she turned, Erin caught a glimpse of her cutie mark, what looked like an open ledger. She wondered briefly what it meant. Erin followed her in, taking the time to glance around at the decor. As with Applejack's kitchen, it looked startlingly like an old-fashioned human home, the kind you sometimes might see in a movie or old TV show. The walls were a creamy off-white, with red wood trim. The dark hardwood floors were in good shape, a few scuffs and scratches but nothing serious. The floors also had several area rugs, probably to cut down on the number of additional scratches that the floor would receive. The rugs themselves were simple and well made, though showing some signs of wear, and made of simple colors and patterns. The room itself smelled mildly of soap and flowers, a combination that Erin found vaguely comforting. Meadowlark led her into a large common area with scattered furniture, mostly low couches and small end or coffee tables, and most of the tables had vases of fresh flowers on them. Several doors were scattered at regular intervals down one of the walls, and a small hallway jutted down one end of the room. There was also a staircase going up. Meadowlark turned to talk to her again. Well, this is the living area, as you can see. The rooms are pretty small, so feel free to relax out here, as long as you don't disturb other guests. The rest room and the bath are down that hallway, she said, pointing with a hoof, and it's first come, first served. There are 2 other guests staying here at the moment, so it shouldn't be hard to get in there if you need to, but it's probably a good idea to not wait until the last minute, just in case. Erin nodded at that, thinking that it was pretty sensible advice. Upstairs is my apartment, the yellow unicorn continued. Please, don't bother me up there unless it's an actual emergency. If it's not urgent, you can just write a note and put it in the box, there, she said, pointing to a red box with the word, manager, written on it in black. Sounds good. So, Sunflower, how long were you planning on staying? Lime Swirl explained that we start charging after the 3rd night, right? Oh, yes. Well, I'm not sure. I'm hoping to move to Ponyville, but that means I need to find work. I really don't have any. It's right now. Well, ponies are always looking for help around here. In fact, over by Town Hall there's a board where ponies can post notices for different kinds of help needed, and that might be a good place to start. If you decide to stay past the 3rd night, just let me know by dropping a note in the box, and I'll collect the money daily. Sounds good. Also, I'm the manager here, but it really doesn't take much of my time. My real job is to do the town census and make up population reports for the mayor. So, if you're moving here, I'll have to ask you a few questions. Don't worry about that now, though, I can wait a couple days until you settle in before I start harassing you for information. Meadowlark laughed briefly at that. Erin chuckled back weakly. What kinds of questions was she going to ask? She decided that it would probably be best to do some research before finding work. She had to know enough about Equestria and how it worked to be able to fake it accurately. Her food supplies should last her a couple days, at least, and she could always graze after that ran out, so her only real worry was getting the bits needed to pay for the room after the 3rd night. Research definitely comes first, she thought. Here we go, Meadowlark said, this is your room. She pushed the door marked number 4 open and Erin peeked inside. The room was tiny, which was to be expected. There was also a small bed stuck in one corner of the room, which Erin found mildly surprising. She had half expected a pile of hay, or something. There was a small bureau with 5 drawers in another corner, opposite the bed, and a desk with a low bench for sitting on in another. A tiny window was against the wall, between the bed and the bureau. Like the common area, the furnishings in the room were sturdy, simple, and a little worn. But clean, very clean and cared for. Meadowlark was obviously a good manager, if she kept things in such good order. The bed was made with a red and black checked blanket, and a large green comforter was folded up at the end of the bed. There was also a large chest, apparently made of cedar, at the foot of the bed. It's very nice, Erin said, genuinely pleased. Meadowlark smiled at the praise. Well, it's small, but I keep it clean. I'll ask you to do the same. I'm not a maid, so I'll be asking each guest to do their own laundry and cleaning. The bedding is fresh right now, and I'm asking that you wash it when you're done with your stay. I'll show you where the laundry area is in a minute. Is it okay if I leave some of my things here? Yes, naturally, Meadowlark replied. It's your room now, at least for the time being. Here, come with me and I'll show you the rest of the house. Erin quickly stripped off her saddlebags and dropped them on the desk, sighing with relief. She still felt like she could use a good brushing, but at least the darn things were off. Meadowlark continued with the brief tour of the rest of the facilities. The hallway to the restroom and bathing area ended with 4 doors, the one at the very end leading outside, with the restroom door on the left, and the door to the bath and the linen closet on the right. The restroom was a bit larger than Erin's room, and she looked in, curious to see what an equestrian bathroom would look like. She'd only used modified human bathrooms as a pony so far. What she saw was basically a raised trough with a foot pedal that she guessed acted as a flusher, and a small bidet-looking device that also seemed to be operated by foot pedal. There was a pedestal sink as well, with a bar of soap. The linen closet was just outside the door of the bath, and had a variety of towels in it. Meadowlark repeated that she expected the guests to wash and put back any towels that they used. Erin nodded agreement. The bath area itself was actually pretty tiny, with a small claw-footed tub and a shower head, which pleased Erin to no end. She much preferred showers over baths. There was another pedestal sink in there as well, most likely for the brushing of teeth, and a small mirror. The building manager then led Erin out the back door and into the yard, where she was vaguely surprised to see an old-fashioned washtub with a washboard and clotheslines strung up. There were a couple of towels drying on the line already, Erin saw, guessing that those were from the other guests. There was a small cabinet outside that held soap for washing, and in the center of the yard there was a long-handled pump for the water. She stared at it briefly, never having seen an actual water pump before, though she had heard about them. As they concluded the tour, Meadowlark wrapped up by saying, "Now, I know that sometimes accidents happen, and I've had ponies break or damage things before. If it's an honest accident, I'll probably let it go, or maybe just charge a couple of bits for it, but you have to tell me right away. If you don't tell me, I'm going to have to assume that you did it on purpose or are trying to hide it, and I'll charge you full price for a replacement. We're operating on a very small budget here, and I can't have ponies breaking things, okay?" "Okay, that makes sense," Erin said, resolving to be super careful. "Well, that's about all. Did you have any questions before I go back up to my apartment?" Yes, if you don't mind. Could you tell me if Ponyville has a library I could visit?" "You could just check your welcome packet, you know," Meadowlark said with a sigh as Erin blushed with embarrassment. She had already forgotten about the map. "But yes, we do have a library. It's in the center of town, that way," again pointing with a hoof. "Just look for a large tree. You can't miss it, okay? Thank you so much for all of this. It's a great relief having a place to stay." "You're quite welcome," Meadowlark replied with a small smile. "Make yourself at home, clean up after yourself, respect your neighbors, and try not to make too much noise. That's all I ask of any pony. Have a good stay." And with that, Meadowlark turned and trotted back into the building. Erin shouted a quick "thank you" after her, and then moved off in the direction that the yellow unicorn had pointed. As she trotted along, she regarded her surroundings curiously. The common theme for housing still extended here, but she could see that many of the homes had small businesses on the first floor. She guessed that it was a similar situation as the guest house, where the business happened on the first floor, and the family lived on the second. It seemed like a really sensible arrangement to her. Small colts and fillies filled the streets ahead of her, playing various games, often involving hoops or balls. Some of them were obviously playing hide and seek, or some variant of tag. Erin smiled to see them play. They seemed so much like human children in their interactions, but so much cuter, at least to her. She found herself wondering again about how the ponies chose their cutie marks, seeing that none of the children had any. How did they choose them, and what did they mean? Erin shook her head, deciding it was a mystery for another time, and focused on getting to the library. She did see the leaves of a large tree up ahead, up above the rooftops, and made her way towards it. That was likely to be the tree that Meadowlark was talking about, with the library next to it. As it came into view, however, Erin stopped in her tracks, once again shocked right down to her hooftips. The library wasn't next to the tree. The library was the tree. It was, indeed, a large tree, and obviously alive, if the green leaves adorning it were any indication. But it had a large door set into it, and several windows. And a balcony in a tree. She shook her head again, trying to clear it. Maybe one of these days, she thought as she made her way up to the library door, this town would stop surprising the heck out of her. She knocked, and heard a young, male-sounding voice say, "Hold on, be right there." The door cracked open, and the voice said, "Yes, how can I help you?" Erin would have replied, but she was far too busy being shocked once again. She felt the strength go out of her back legs and her rump hit the ground as she stared at the small, bipedal purple lizard thing with green spikes on its head. The lizard thing blinked its green eyes at her, then grinned impishly and said, "Don't tell me, let me guess. First time seeing a dragon. Dragon." Erin stuttered. "A dragon, and it talks." While most of her brain was stuck in neutral, a small part of her analyzed the situation. A dragon, which means another race in Equestria that humans didn't know about. And it talked, meaning another intelligent race in Equestria. Maybe it wasn't even the ponies in charge, but the dragons. Or, maybe Equestria was just one nation, and the dragons had their own country. And who knew what they were capable of? They had just barely started studying the ponies. Dragons were a huge unknown. "Yup, a dragon. That's me, 30 pounds of muscle and awesomeness." Erin blinked at the tiny dragon. "And you talk," she said, still pretty shocked. The dragon rolled his eyes. "Nope, it's all in your imagination. I'm Spike, by the way." "Oh, Sunflower. I'm Sunflower." She stood up shakily, hoping Spike didn't notice her near slip when giving her name. "You're the librarian here." "Oh, no, that's Twilight Sparkle. She's out at the moment, though, hanging with a couple friends. I'm her number one assistant. You can come in, if you want." And, with that, Spike opened the door the rest of the way and stood aside, allowing Erin to step past him into the library. She wasn't sure what she expected the inside of a tree to look like, but it definitely wasn't like this. It was much roomier, for one thing. The large, round center area with shelves carved, apparently, from the tree itself was surprising enough, but there was also a staircase going up. There were a few small windows letting light in, and a doorway into what looked like a kitchen going off to one side. "Wow," she said, looking around to take it all in. "This place is incredible." "Yeah, I guess, if you like books," Spike said, shrugging. "Anyway, what are you looking for?" Well, I guess if you have a book that tells about the history of Equestria, that would be a good start. Also, I'd like one that has the history of Ponyville. And maybe an atlas, if you have one." "No problem, coming right up." "Do you want detailed history, or an overview?" "Well, probably an overview to start, and then I can get into the detailed stuff later," she said. "Gotcha," Spike replied, and scooted off. He brought back the books one at a time, staggering a bit under the weight of the atlas, placing them on a small desk. "Did you want to read these here, or take them home with you?" he asked. "Oh, I can check these out." She thought about her cramped room for a moment. Also, she had left her saddlebags behind. How would she get them back to her room? "Maybe I should read them here for now, then check them out later if I haven't finished them." "Is that a problem?" "Nah," the little dragon said. "We have ponies coming by all the time for research and stuff, and that's what this area is for. I've got some more chores to do, though, so I'll leave you to it. Just give a holler if you need me, and don't go upstairs. That's where Twilight's and my bedroom is, nothing else interesting up there." "Okay, thank you," Erin said. Spike waved and walked off, and she nosed open the first book, which happened to be the atlas, and started glancing through the various maps. Equestria, as far as she could tell after studying the atlas for a few minutes, was a large country, but not the whole world. She blinked in surprise when she saw various other nations listed on the map. The Griffin Kingdom was one, Zebrica another, far across the ocean. There were several more as well, though those were the largest. There was also a section of the world map that was simply marked, "Here there be dragons," which made Erin smile until she realized that, in this case, that was probably literally true. She studied the map's inside, and then decided that it was too much all at once to take in. Instead, she glanced briefly at each page, confident that her implants would record the data for Dr. Velchik and the harmonics team to go through at a later date. Putting the atlas aside, she opened up Equestrian History by Sunfire Brand and started reading. Almost immediately, she was lost. Wendigos, some sort of magical creature that fed off strife and created cold weather. Was this history, or mythology? She flipped through the book detailing the original founding of Equestria by the 3 pony tribes, stopping at the first mention of the royal princesses. Apparently, originally, there were 2 royal princesses, though the book was vague on where they came from. Celestia, the princess of the day, and Luna, princess of the night. Actually, on rereading that section, Erin realized that the book was insinuating that the princesses were somehow responsible for the day and the night. She shook her head. She couldn't be sure how much of this was accurate and how much was fairy tale. She continued reading, getting more and more confused as she went. Apparently, the royal sisters had shown up to battle some malevolent force or deity known as Discord, which was making ponies' lives miserable back then. They had shown up and imposed order, then took over the nation. It sounded like an allegorical tale to Erin. Probably Discord was some sort of internal strife between the pony tribes. And then the sisters showed up, most likely at the head of an army, and took things over, imposing order like the Romans did in Europe a couple thousand years ago. It got odder still, though. There was, close to 1,000 years before this book had been written, some sort of war between the 2 sisters over the throne. One of them, Luna, had started calling herself Nightmare Moon. Apparently, she wasn't getting enough attention on the night shift, or something. Erin sympathized a little, and gave the princess points for picking an awesome-sounding supervillain name. The book certainly had no trouble branding her as wicked and evil, proving once again that history was written by the victors. Then she realized something odd, and double-checked the dates. The first mention of Celestia and Luna was centuries before the mention of Nightmare Moon. But the princesses in the Nightmare Moon story had the same names. Also, a rough illustration seemed to show that the princesses had both wings and horns, which would indicate, if they actually existed outside of myth, that they represented a 4th variant of ponies. Erin read on. After the Nightmare Moon incident where, apparently, Celestia had used something called the Elements of Harmony to banish her sister to the moon, whatever that meant, Equestria had been fairly peaceful. A few hundred years after Luna's rebellion, there was a near war with the expanding Griffin Kingdom, which another princess, apparently also called Celestia, managed to avert. That was by far the most interesting thing that had happened in the intervening years, at least according to this book. Erin closed the book, thinking about what she'd read. She had no idea how recent the so-called history in the book was, and how much was myth and how much was real. She had a feeling that what she had just read was more along the lines of a holy book rather than a pure history. Maybe when the librarian returned she could ask her some more details about what actually happened. She'd have to be careful, though. If these ponies had their mythology and history so intertwined like that, any indication that she didn't believe the same way could be seen as an indication of heresy, which could be uncomfortable. She had a hard time imagining the ponies she had met so far as a torch-wielding mob, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Also, finding out the current date would probably help put things in perspective. She had no idea how contemporary the book she had just read was. The date stamped on the inside cover said that it had been published in AF 1482, whatever that meant. Sighing, she pushed the book aside and was just opening the history of Ponyville when the front door opened. Erin glanced over to see a light purple unicorn make her way inside, horn glowing as she lifted her saddlebags off with telekinesis. The unicorn had a straight dark blue mane with bangs, with a streak of purple next to another streak of magenta. Erin wondered briefly if that was natural, or an added highlight. "Speak, the strange unicorn called out, then noticed Erin looking at her. "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there. I'm Twilight Sparkle, and..." Twilight trailed off, staring at her oddly. Erin cleared her throat. I'm Sunflower. Spike let me in to do some studying, I hope that's okay." The mare blinked in apparent surprise, then smiled and said, "Of course, that's perfectly fine." Twilight's smile faded as she looked at her again. Erin started feeling distinctly uncomfortable. The fear that she had felt earlier in the day, when she still half expected the ponies to notice something odd or weird about her, started trickling back. No other pony had looked at her in any way as if she were at all odd or different, but the way Twilight Sparkle was staring at her made her wonder if this one had noticed something all the others had missed. As fresh fear coursed into her, Erin decided that it was time to go. Is it okay if I borrow this book?" she asked, pointing to the history of Ponyville. "I can bring it back tomorrow, I just wanted something to read tonight." The unicorn shook her head as if to clear it, and when she looked at Erin again, her expression seemed perfectly friendly. And yet, she never stopped staring at her, a look of mild confusion on her face. "Of course," she told Erin. "You can actually keep it for a week, if you want, just bring it back by then." "Oh okay," Erin said, then edged her way around the unicorn, placing the book on her back behind her withers. "I'll see you when I return the book, I guess." "Oh, sure, that's fine." Twilight was still looking at her. So, have a good day, then," Erin said, backing nervously out the door. "You too," the unicorn said. "Okay, bye." And with that, Erin turned and walked quickly away from the library. Once she'd gotten about 20 feet away, she glanced back. A chill ran down her spine as she saw Twilight Sparkle standing in the doorway, staring directly at her with a small frown on her face. She returned her gaze forward and took the first side street she could, turning left out of the unicorn's field of vision. All the way back to the guest house, Erin felt like she was being followed. She kept glancing behind herself, but nobody was there, at least that she could see. Still, she walked quickly, being careful to keep the book centered on her back. With all the glancing behind her, though, she quickly managed to get lost. The formerly idyllic Ponyville now seemed vaguely threatening to her, and she thought that some of the ponies she passed were now giving her odd looks, too. Hopefully, it was just her imagination. Finally, as the sun was starting to set, she found herself back in the town square again. Breathing a sigh of relief, she turned until she found the guest house, then trotted up to it, pushing the door open with her hoof. She stepped into the common area and froze in surprise as she saw a stallion there, reclined on one of the sofas, apparently reading the newspaper. The stallion was an earth pony, with a light brown coat and a black mane. He had what looked like a sack tied with twine on his flank. He looked up as Erin entered, a smile on his muzzle and a look of cold calculation in his eyes. Well, howdy, miss. I take it you're another member of our happy guest house family. Erin nodded, too shaken up from the encounter with Twilight Sparkle and getting lost in town to really want to talk, but not wanting to be rude to the new pony. My name is Quicksail, I'm a traveling Salisbury from Mersborough, east of Hoofington. Or, I should say, originally from Marsborough, because I'm kind of from all over right now. What's your name, pretty filly? Erin decided she wasn't fond of the stallion's grin. It seemed just a little too familiar, with more than a hint of a leer. It was an unwelcome reminder that, even though she didn't find ponies to be attractive in the slightest, that didn't change the fact that she currently was a pony, or at least shaped like one, and the feeling may not be mutual. Ugh, I really don't want to deal with this right now, she thought. My name is Sunflower. And yes, I'm new here, and pretty worn out from traveling today. If you'll excuse me, I think I'll just head to my bedroom right away. Well, of course, pretty lady. Just let me know if you ever want company, he said smoothly, with an accompanying eyebrow waggle that caused Erin to flinch with repulsion. Eyes fixed firmly on the floor, she marched past Quicksail and up to the door of her room, opening it quickly. As she went in, she looked back and noticed that the stallion was looking her way. Oh, God, is he staring at my rump, she thought with a feeling of queasy dread working through her stomach. He glanced up, saw her looking at him, and winked. Erin managed to swallow a scream of horror, which instead came out as a strangled mew of disgust. She entered her room and shut the door, barely managing to avoid slamming it. She heard Quicksail chuckling to himself on the other side of the door. Taking a deep breath, she held it for a moment, then breathed it out, shuddering. So far, she had met 2 male ponies. One of them had been too shy to talk, the other was an over-the-top slimeball. Hopefully they represented the absolute extreme ranges of the stallion population, or this could end up being a very tiresome stay in Ponyville. She flopped down in the bed, closing her eyes and just concentrating on breathing. It had been an eventful day. Not that long ago, she had been on Earth, her home. Since then, she had gone through a portal into another world, met talking alien ponies, some of whom could fly, others of whom could use telekinesis, and others of whom were apparently disgusting perverts. She also met a talking bipedal dragon and an overly curious librarian that had made her distinctly uncomfortable with her scrutiny. It had been a long day so far. She decided that she would give herself a quick brushing to calm herself down and finally relieve her itchy back. She made her way over to her saddlebags and started unpacking them, sticking the blankets and many of the supplies in the drawers of the bureau. When she got to the food that Applejack had packed for her, a quick rumbling in her stomach reminded her that lunch had been hours ago now, and that it was starting to get late in the evening. She grabbed her brush with her mouth and began to brush out her coat, then her tail. Switching the brush to her 4 hooves, she brushed her mane and neck. By the time she had gotten the worst of the day's tangles out, she was feeling much better and more relaxed. She snacked quickly on more of the bread and jam from the lunch earlier, and it was almost as delicious as it had been earlier that day. Finally, feeling calm, well-fed, and comfortable, she decided to forego brushing her teeth so as to avoid another upsetting encounter with Quicksail, and to try and get some sleep. She lay down in the bed, slipping between the sheets and closing her eyes. Something was nagging at her, though, something she had forgotten. Oh, yes. Her daily journal. Quietly, so as to not be overheard through the walls of her room, she started to whisper. Erin's journal, Day 1. Dear Dr. Velchik and the rest of the Harmonics team. This is the end of my first day here in what we called Ponyworld, which we now know is called Equestria. Or, at least this nation is called Equestria, because I found out that there are other nations here as well. After having met a talking dragon, and seeing places on the map called the Griffin Kingdom, and such, I've come to the conclusion that ponies are not, as previously suspected, the only intelligent form of life here on this world. Though, it remains to be seen if the griffins are actually griffins, like from our mythology, or something different, perhaps even ponies calling themselves griffins, in order to sound tougher or something. That makes our task much more complex, as I'm sure you know. Instead of trying to visit those other nations, I think it's wiser if I stay here and learn as much as I can about them from the locals, and from their books. Though, that librarian makes me nervous. Maybe I can go visit the library when she's not there. I'm sure there are plenty of times that she leaves for errands and the like, and I only have to be there long enough to return books and check out new ones. So far, everyone, or every pony, to use their vernacular, has been really nice, with the exception of a certain slimy sales pony who shall remain nameless, and please slap Dr. Edwards for me if he says anything inappropriate about my encounter with him. Erin rolled over to make herself more comfortable, snuggling deeper into the blanket with a contented sigh. This nation is apparently a monarchy, with the center of power in the city of Canterlot, located to the northeast of Ponyville. Apparently there are at least 2 princesses again, though the history book I read indicated that there was only one, after the second princess was banished after a failed coup. It seems like the name, Celestia, must be passed down from generation to generation. I'm not sure if it's actually a name, or if it's a title. I'll try to find that out. Also, the Apple family has some amazing bakers in it. I really wish you could have tried those pies and other treats, they were incredible. Erin yawned hugely all of a sudden, and her eyes felt too heavy to hold open much longer. Anyway, it's been a long and tiring day. Even though it's a bit early, I'm going to sleep now. That's the end of day 1. More info to come in the morning. Signing off, Erin Olsen, aka Sunflower.